always, if you come to Pakistan, you'll find the religious scholars acting like a minority in front of these goons and these thugs who are running the system.
The number one quality of a true scholar is fearlessness.
The nature of human being is to rebel against any kind of oppression. So if the Quran is not energizing us, it's not structuring us, whoever is translating the Quran to us is at fault.
We need to make sure that the Muslimin understand that Islam is not just about rituals. It's not like Christianity, not like Judaism, it's not like Hinduism.
We don't get a veto. Nobody got crucified for our sins. We are not going to enjoy any kind of nepotism that we're Muslims so we get a free ticket to Jannah. No.
Islam is a full system of life. It's a political system.
That if you do not perform, you do not give, the only religion that guarantees hell to its followers is Islam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we have a fantastic episode. We have a special guest, Sahil Adeem, who is joining us today. And we also have our very own Sheikh Usta today. Sahil Adeem is a behavioral psychologist, speaker, and public intellectual known for his bold critiques of secular modernity. Through his lectures and media appearances, Sahil challenges conventional narratives on politics, identity, and morality, urging Muslims to return to Quranic thinking as our foundation. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sahil. Very welcome to you, inshallah, for today's episode. And to introduce Sheikh Usta, he is the founder of the I3 Institute, a thought leader and mobilizer in the Ummah for over 20 years. With formal training in Islamic studies and an MBA under his belt, he brings a rare blend of Islamic scholarship and corporate experience. He's a mentor to countless young Muslims. Sheikh Usta is on a mission to desecularize the Muslim mind and Ummadic revival. Today, we're going to be discussing a lot of amazing things, inshallah. We're going to diagnose the problems facing the Ummah today, the vision for revival, and what are the practical steps and plans that are being done, inshallah ta'ala. We'll hear from Sahid and we'll hear from Sheikh Usta. Now, many people would see the Ummah and say the Ummah is in a state of weakness, a state of confusion. And what we're seeing in the genocide in Gaza, in Sudan, this is making it even incredibly clear. There is clearly a crisis of leadership in the Ummah. So where is the issue? And I'll direct it to you, Sahil, is where is the issue? Is it the rulers? Is it the scholarship? Is it the people? Where is the problem coming from?
If the solution is in Islam, then we have to look at the custodian of the book. The rulers are not, and they never claim to be the custodians of the book. They're trained out of the book when they were kids. They've actually been trained into a concept that Islam is only for the masjid. And that's where the scholarship actually comes into play. So I don't blame the rulers. They came out from our own homes. They're not aliens from any other planet. They're not immigrants from Poland or Austria. They're regular Muslims living in our own homes. They believe in the same definitions that the Quran is for the masjid and Victoria is for the parliaments. That's the problem. And I think scholarship, the way they've defined Islam around these concepts, affects the psychology of the child, and he grows himself out of Islam because it's a natural need of a human being to be making decisions and giving reactions to bigger decisions around his life. And Quran today is not giving any decisions around my life, because the custodian of the Quran is actually talking about those things which are not at all for the group, not at all for the bigger definition of Ummah. Quran does not affect, even passively, the bigger definitions of our political systems. So that's where I blame the scholarship. If there are a lot of sick people on the street and there's a doctor who's just, playing tennis around the court, I'm not going to talk about anybody else except why did you become a doctor if you're not going to even look at us or try and do something about these people? So, because you're confusing everybody, We could have come up with some other solution or whatever we could do, because the nature of human being is to rebel against any kind of oppression. It's not rocket science. It's not something which is alien to... non-Muslims have rebelled against the oppressive regimes 1,000,000 times right in front of us. They're doing it right now in different parts of the world right now. So if Muslims are not doing anything in a constructive, in an organized, in an orchestrated manner, energized by the Quran, defined by the Quran, limited in its totality by the Quran of how not to do a lot of stuff which a lot of nations have actually ended up doing during their own lift. So if the Quran is not energizing us, it's not structuring us, that means whoever is translating the Quran to us is at fault.
SubhanAllah, the analogy of the doctor really makes it so clear, right? And to anybody thinking about this problem and obvious. Sahil mentioned, right, that the people who are bringing the Quran to us and teaching and the scholarship, it's not energizing us. Politics, and you mentioned also politics being seen as dirty.
Yeah.
Now, you had the Prophet ﷺ, you had the Sahaba. It wasn't like that. But today it's like this. Like, how did this disconnect occur? And like, where did things fall apart to where we are today?
It fell apart after the colonial Western countries, European countries, have invaded the Muslim world. They denied any type of Islamic discourse except the ritualistic spiritual one. That was very apparent in Egypt, but more even apparent in the Indian subcontinent, especially after 1857. So no discussion of any type of political work. Any movement that was allowed in the Indian subcontinent was only spiritual in basis. And that's how Islam was secularized by force. The two main, I would say, the two heavyweights in the Muslim world in the 1800s, which was Al-Azhar in Egypt, this is the center, the heart of the Arab world, and the Indian subcontinent, which is the heart of the eastern part of the Muslim world between Indonesia to Persia. Both of them were secularized specifically by France and Britain. That's what led us to what we are here today. And within the I3 initiative, basically, which is our institution and our ecosystem of dawah work, we believe that the goal is to desecularize the Muslim mind. This is who we are. This is a term that we coined. This is the project that we have initiated 6-7 years ago, alhamdulillah. And we need to make sure that the Muslimin understand that Islam is not just about rituals. It's not like Christianity. It's not like Judaism. It's not like Hinduism. Islam is a full system of life. It's a political system. It solves all problems and sets laws and policy for society, for the economy, for governance, also for spirituality, because it's a non-secular political system that have been revealed by the divine, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I would agree 100% with Sahil. I would say maybe for a long time, many Islamic movements that are political in nature, may Allah bless them all, have pointed the finger at the rulers in the Muslim world. And I believe basically the problem is the religious institutions in the Muslim world that graduate secular-minded scholars. And subhanAllah, as he said, you read the Quran as a scholar. Now you're a scholar, right? You graduated after 7, 8, 9 years of madrasa or azhar or whatever it is. You did not just read the Quran, you read the Quran, you memorized the Quran, you've read many tafasir, you understood the Arabic language, you understood the Sharia, you understood the fiqh, you understood the usul, you understood the aqidah. After all that, you understand what Islam is. It's just many scholars, not all of them. There's lots of great scholars today in the Muslim world from Indonesia to Morocco. We love them and we kiss their feet even if we have to, out of honor and love. But many say, look, I don't want to basically speak about politics because I don't want to get I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers.
And it's just on that point, right, on ruffling people's feathers. And I want to get both of your thoughts on this. People might say that, okay, the scholar, you guys are putting too much responsibility on the scholars because they're going to be threatened, they'll be tortured, they'll be thrown in jail. Why are we just, putting so much pressure on them? Can't the ruler take some accountability and the scholar take some accountability in this scenario?
Well, first of all, I'm not giving the rulers a free ride at all, right? We're just saying, what is the root cause? The root cause basis the scholar is not basically explaining what Islam is to the masses. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa said that al-ulama'u warathatul anbiya, which translates to the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. Now, the prophets alayhi salam, what's their job? When God sends prophets, what's their job? Political work to free society from the shackles of man-made law and to instate the only just system of life, which is God's system. Whether it is the law in the Torah with Musa alayhi salam, or the Psalms of David, or the Bible of Jesus Christ alayhi salam, or the Quran that was sent to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. All the prophets had one job, is to rectify society so society could live in peace and justice. And that justice could only be attained by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the all-wise, all-perfect, all-knowing. You see what I'm saying? So now if the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, they need to do their job. Rasulullah didn't tell us basically the rulers are the inheritors of the prophet. He said the scholars are the inheritors of the prophet, the one who understand the deen. So the prophets sacrificed. Some of the prophets were killed, were sawn into 2 pieces, were crucified. So this is the path of scholarship. You don't want to be a scholar. Don't be a scholar, but don't go and change what scholarship's all about. You see what I'm saying?
That is a very good answer, right? Because people do feel like, okay, you know what? If someone's going to take them, maybe we need to be more compassionate on them, or maybe our rhetoric should be nicer with them. Sahil, I want to kind of go to you and ask you really, from your observations, right? Because starting from the West, because we'll start with the West and then get you both your thoughts and then go to the East. What are the biggest challenges facing Muslims in the West today? And is it connected to the problem of scholarship?
Muslims in the West or the East, actually, when I look at the Western Muslims, I see at best a third generation of immigrants. Most of the countries have second. Some have recently been receiving the first generation of Muslims, like Australia and England, for example, has a third generation Muslim diaspora. But if you see the stratas, and I see them and I've studied them, to see what kind of stratas actually end up across the Atlantic. And those are not your high-end performers of your Muslim nations, Muslim lands. They actually had to leave because of whatever reasons, but mostly economic reasons. There's a certain kind of brain that America received or the North American continent received. There's definitely a certain peculiar kind of Muslim that England received because of the subcontinental Muslim drift. And those people are not going to perform much in their own lands because they're not really higher up on the hierarchy of performance inside their own lands. So they're naturally going to be survivors, pleading or bowing to the dominant system, and they're going to take their time, bear children, and then train them into coming into some sort of economic power or some sort of a sustainable platform through which they can actually raise their IQ and then have kids in turn who are going to be very native, and they're going to think like an American or a Canadian or an Englishman, and they're going to act like them and be confident like them. But it's too soon for me to actually differentiate because I've been 3 times in England, practically lived there the last 2 years, and I could not find a regular native English Muslim. That's such a big problem because I could find Native Americans living in America because they were second generation, they were really raised into America. And these third generation English kids really had a lot more India or Pakistan or Arabia in them, and they were still feeling the alien gene really into their psychology, which is very weird. So I know as a psychologist, I can tell you, that was their economic background that was playing into their inferior psychology, which is still going to affect the way they look at Islam, because they're not going to look at Islam as their first definitive identity. They're looking at being English or being American or Canadian as their first definitive identity, because these Muslims who immigrated, they didn't really, and they were not, maybe they were afraid, maybe they didn't know any better. They gave that very secular, their very weak footings of Islam and, coming into a community, coming together, making lobby, giving each other enough power to make sure every child becomes confident that I'm not alone here. I don't have to just survive. I can thrive because of these people coming together in America or Canada or England. But it didn't really happen. So I see a weaker psychology in terms of, I'm only talking through the lens of Islam, okay? Even though they are economically well off, politically well aware of what's going on in the world, but they're Islamically, they're far more distant. They're actually way more distant from the true definition of Islam than clusters living in a Muslim-dominant land like Arabia or Pakistan or Indonesia or wherever, or North Africa. So this is the problem we need to solve. We have weaker psychology Islamically and stronger psychology politically inside American Muslims and English Muslims. But they're English. They're very patriotic to their nationalistic identity. And I remember after the 7/7 attacks, the big referendum happened in England where they were asked point blank whether you're a Muslim first or a British first. And 83% of Muslims said that they were British first. So, and that just goes to show a lot about the big diaspora of Muslims across the Atlantic and Europe. So when it comes down to the socioeconomic factors, you can see, and even performing, even IQ, and even in their personal groundedness of morality, you can see better Muslims in Europe or America or England. But when it comes down to the demands of Islam, they're farther away from a regular Muslim inside the African Arabian or the Pakistani Muslim.
So on this point of this observations that you've kind of noticed on different places, that Muslims are certain aspects stronger, certain aspects and mindset a little bit weaker. I want to pass it to you, Sheikh, and just get your kind of thoughts on this piece, right? Like, you've had considerable dawah experience in the West for decades, and you've been here for a while. Have you seen a change within the Muslims in the West throughout all these years? What was the biggest challenge you saw at the very beginning when you were here? And is that still an issue today?
Look, the biggest problem in the 90s here in both America and Canada back then is the love of dunya. North America, in contrast to Europe, is very rich. The opportunities here, basically, for climbing the social ladder and pursuing the American dream is humongous. There's access for money, access for jobs, access for growth, access for higher quality education is magnificent. And the wahan, which is the love of dunya, was in the hearts of the Muslims anyway, sadly. So most of them came here for economic reasons. So they were indulged in the dunya so much. I actually remember when we were in the 90s, the masajid were empty. There's like 4 or 5, 65-year-old retired people. And that's really it. What happened is after September 11 is that the fear was struck in the hearts of people, Muslims. After that, Islamophobia in the 2010s basically intensified in the 2020s due to the populist movements, both in North America and Europe, and created basically this extra fear, even basically, an extra sidelining, disenfranchisement of the Muslim person. So subhanAllah, the Islamic identity is so weak. It is almost like the numbers he's giving me are very, very mind-boggling, to be honest, because a Muslim knows he's a Muslim first and last, and that's really it. Yes, you could be a good citizen of any country. There's no problem. There's no contradiction, actually. But that doesn't define you. Nothing defines you, Your career doesn't define you. Your hobbies doesn't define you. Your culture doesn't define you. Your citizenship doesn't define you. What defines you as a Muslim is only Islam, period. Because that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is incomparable to anything else. Now, when 83% of Muslims basically, they don't feel that Islamic identity is number one, it doesn't matter what's number one for them, whether it's national identity or their homeland identity or their career or whatever it is. If Islam is not number one, we have a big issue. So that's basically where we are right now, is basically Muslims are right now in big trouble, basically, as a diaspora in North America and Europe, where the populist movements and racism and Islamophobia really weakening economies and a clash of civilization between the United States and China is going to just keep putting more pressure on immigrants in general and Muslims in specific, because the white majority wants to get angry at something. And the white politician always basically redirect it away from the government and the failed policies of many of these countries, Western countries, and just let them hate the immigrants and hate the Muslims and hate anything else other than the politicians themselves. What can I say, basically? This is what politicians do, really, in a capitalist world, right?
So now we see kind of this obsession with dunya and specific things in the West, and then also this challenge of identity. Who are Muslims? Who are we as Muslims?
If I may add one small thing, sorry, just one more thing I forgot to say, is that the reason Islam is not an identity, because Islam is only rituals. Like, your rituals don't define you, right? Like, you have your rituals, I have mine, she has hers, he has his. Like, rituals don't define anybody. It's a personal thing, right? And because we as Sahil said, and I agree fully, basically, that's what IC is all about, the desecularization, because Islam came to us as a secular religion. It's not an identity, right? But when Islam goes back to being holistic, which we believe in, which is really a political idea for a just and beautiful society that accepts everybody and gives all religious minorities their right to be part of that society and to practice their religions, in addition to applying the just system within all of society over everybody. Yeah, that is now basically an idea of how to live life that could become an identity and should be the identity of a Muslim. But 99.9% of Muslims just know Islam as just a bunch of rituals. So as long as you're doing that, you've secured your ticket to Jannah. Now when you live life, you don't basically get your values, or at least you don't get your roadmap and blueprint from Islam, because Islam is all about fasting, charity, being good to your parents, being nice akhlaq, speaking softly, and so forth. It is not identity.
This identity confusion, right, that's happening in the West. I want to go back to Sahil, what you mentioned about the Islam that's being pushed even back home everywhere is not really the correct Islam, right? And so people are sadly not thinking from the right identity, from the right framework. So given your experience back home in Pakistan, right, what do you think the issue is back home? You mentioned, for example, the Muslims here are a bit more weaker from an Islamic identity perspective versus back home. Aren't we seeing the West pushing the Rand Corporation, this agenda to push Islam as one part of your identity, and then your nation is first, your culture is first. I'm Somali first, I'm Pakistani first, maybe I'm Muslim second. Is there even a difference between what you've seen in the Muslims in the West and in the East?
Yeah, well, we're a lot more poorer and a lot weaker in a bigger ratio in our own homelands. That's the bigger problem. In Pakistan, you couldn't have put a better spin to the regime of enslaving Muslims than the way they've actually wired this whole society, because the weakest person is going to go to the masjid to be trained into an alim or a mufti, and the strong person is never going to be sent by their own parents into an Islamic educational system. So much so that if they find out, and that's a normal and normative cultural practice, that if you have a lower than average IQ, a school is going to push you out. Regular school is going to push you out. And the first mental response of every Muslim Pakistani is going to be this: is you're a dropout from your early middle school. You're so weak that you couldn't live up to this system. Your first mental response is that you're going to be put into a madrasa or a course of the Quran. So this society has these two little brick and mortar systems, right? In Pakistan and even India. I mean, of course, an Indian system. It's not just a Pakistani system. So the strong will become stronger and the weak will become weaker. You are never going to find even a trace of the Quran in the strong systems, which is going to be pushing into politics and economy and industry and as far as even entertainment, which is translating into money, of course. So any kind of talent that will be spotted, they will make sure that he stays inside the system and he prospers, because, of course, it is, after all, a capitalistic underpinning of whatever is going to go on. And as soon as you're going to be deemed weak and you cannot fit in this power system of any of those flavors, you're going to be given the Quran. That you're not good for anything, so you're going to get the Quran. So you might be able to survive at the lowest, at the bottom of the barrel. So not only that psychologically you're going to be the weakest, you will have no self-esteem, but you will be given a refuge inside a book. It's like a monastery run, for the monks. Said you can, since you cannot fit in the world, even though you wanted to, and we wanted you to, but since you got rejected by the main recipe of the planet, you're going to be given a little side dish, which is going to be the Quran. So he's naturally not going to think high of the Quran. And he's the only guy who's got the book now. You need to understand. So he's going to think low of the book psychologically, so much so that in retrospect, he's going to think so high of physics or biology or business sciences or political science that he's naturally going to come under and make the Quran forcibly bow to these books and systems and people because of his own low self-esteem, because he was rejected, and this rejection was validated by his own father and mother, for God's sakes, the most sincere people. See? So this is the design of the Pakistani Indian society. So you're never going to find a tone on the Maulvi or the Alim. You're not going to find the right attitude. You're not going to find the right initiative. You're not going to find the right energy. You're going to find the most lethargic, most timid people, because they're designed into this weakness. And it starts from as early as 5 years old, literally 5 years old, and even lower sometimes. So you can see, if you can see an MRI of the subcontinent, you'll see a natural pathway from early on that the weaker and the weakest are going towards the book of God. Even a trace of strength you're going to find in IQ or money or prosperity of any kind or any kind of talent, they're going to make sure he doesn't go to the Quran. They're going to pull him and push him into recognition of his talents or skills or whatever strength that he has, and they're going to make him grow into this world. So when I compare the subcontinental Muslims and the Western Muslims, well, the Western Muslims naturally are going to have more vahan, obviously, because they went there for the American dream. They were not born into Pakistan for the American dream. They were born as a native man. They could have had their fair share of power. They look like everybody else. They talk like everybody else. They're not a minority. And they're being treated like a minority. And he's always, if you come to Pakistan, you'll find the religious scholars acting like a minority in front of these goons and these thugs who are running the system. They're going to have, and I'm talking as a doctor, right? I'm not, of course, not a doctor, but as a psychologist, as a doctor, you can see the patient, that this guy has the same virus that an American Muslim who is a first-generation immigrant, who's fresh off the boat, would have that kind of psychological complexes that a Muslim scholar would have in front of these politicians, as if he's got something less, a lot less actually, and he's going to bow to the first gesture this politician is going to make. And I'm not just talking about the big forces which are run by America inside the India and Pakistani systems. Obviously, the deeper state is way deep inside Pakistan, and Donald Trump literally called the shots on Pakistani political system. So the whole design, you need to know the design and the whole system, the way Pakistan works and the way India works and the way Muslims in India and Pakistan are set into. They're two different wheels and they're not connected at any level. And this is the problem. I'm 100% sure this is the same case in North Africa as well. I cannot comment on Arabia because I have not studied Arabian culture deep enough. I haven't lived in the streets or been there for long enough to know whether it's the same thing. And I'm assuming it is because of the fact that I do not see aggressive enough, confident enough scholarship coming from Arabia as well. They're all behaving like monks. They're behaving so timidly. They do not have the right posture to address their own people. These are all psychological indicators which actually show that the disease is with them forever since they were 3 or 4 years old.
To draw this session to a close, we spoke about scholarship gone wrong, identity being confused, and all these things. For each of you both, what would be an example of, because people can only, like one person told me, my country has existed for forever, right? And I was like, well, your country actually only existed for a few decades, not even a century, right? So people only know what they experienced. What does scholarship done right look like? What does identity done right look like? What does it mean to have the identity in the right way as a Muslim?
Well, identity is a very simple construct of your duties, nothing else. Nothing else but your duties. For example, if I had a nationalistic Pakistani identity, I would be talking about my duties over my fellow citizens. Nothing else. My identity is a demand, a push, or a weight on my shoulders. It's not something I need to enjoy. It's something that people should enjoy because of me. That's a demand of any common sense person, even if he's a nationalistic, patriotic American. It is the duty upon what he has to give, and he has to perform to be able to give, so that he can fulfill his identity. That's the natural demand of your own self-esteem. If I'm a receiver for whatever favors I need from a lot of people, I'm actually cracking and fracturing my own self-esteem, right? That's the crash of my identity. So identity is the number and list of categories of responsibilities people have. You have over people to give. That's why Islamic identity is not only vertically the deepest, but horizontally the widest spread. It puts the kind of demands that Islam puts on the Muslim man and woman. So we need to understand what is the structure and the architecture of identity, and that's the list of responsibilities of a human being. So Islamic scholarship done right would have actually, why do you think we're talking about the political side of it, because politics is the only way to fulfill a group responsibility over the world. Actually, Islam says, لِيُظْهِرَ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, which means our responsibility was for the Eskimos in Alaska to the Aboriginals in Auckland, New Zealand. They should have been prospering because of Islam being on this planet. And through what? Through us, through Muslims performing. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ. Allah says, وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ. So any and everywhere. We should have been in South Africa fighting against apartheid, fighting tooth and nail against apartheid. This is a responsibility. It's not something, we don't get a veto. We are not going to enjoy any kind of nepotism that we're Muslims, so we got a free ticket to Jannah. No. Actually, the only religion that guarantees hell to its followers is Islam. That if you do not perform, you do not give. We're not the chosen ones. We are not, nobody got crucified for our sins. We are actually the only nation that follow a book which guarantees hell to its own followers, that if you're not going to fulfill any and every iota, syllable, every single syllable of the Quran, you're not going to follow fully, then you are the first people who will be put to justice in hell. So every other person is a Gentile for a Jewish man, and we are the Gentiles of our own nation. This is the way we need to look at our own book, that we are the lowest if we don't perform. And till the last breath, no Muslim can get a guarantee of whatever he's done, that yes, you know what, you made it. That is the kind of book that we follow. That is the kind of identity that we have, that from the moment we take birth till the last breath, we'll always be giving, we'll always be doing, we'll always be raising our competence to give more, and we'll be raising our competence to know what else we can give to this planet and to the progress of human beings. I'm talking about real sciences to the humanities, both the categories. So we need to prosper our IQs and our EQs through the Quran so that we can actually get a broader stretch over 100, 200 years of how we can actually make sure our next generations prosper to help the rest of the world. And I'm one of those people who does not even believe that we have to convert everybody into Islam. That's not the job of a Muslim. If they convert, good enough. Through our actions, they get inspired and come in themselves. Our job is to make sure the system runs to the rules and commandments of Allah so that everybody prospers, regardless of whether he's a Muslim or not. That's the job. That's the identity.
Jazakallah khairan. Very powerful words. And Sheikh, for you, like you often bring up, a Muslim who's transformed, a person who sees the world through the Islamic lens, right? Just looking at what's happening in the world today, and you look at the time of the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, they faced so much difficulty and adversity. But how did they think about the world differently than how we're thinking about the world today, such that it made them from a society of zero to a society of heroes? What is it that we're missing today? Like, what do they have?
The Islamic identity is embodying what do you believe about how to be in life, how to live life. What is your belief of how life should be and how you should pursue it is your identity. And from that perspective, if you believe in Islam as a political idea that defines how individuals live within a social fabric of other human beings in a structured way, basically, what forms really nations and societies, that becomes your identity. So La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah defines the whole structure of life. The first part, which is La ilaha illallah, defines that the law that should govern human collections, which is societies, should come from only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person believes that that law is what causes justice and therefore peace and prosperity and human development and national development, that would become the dream that every single person, when they identify with, they pursue in life and they embody, right? But again, as I said, sadly, the reason Islam is not an identity is because it's only secularized, only rituals. So for us to regain our Islamic identity and for us to reshape our minds and to re-understand what Islam really is, as a political idea that causes cohesion, peace, and justice, and prosperity and development for any human society on earth. Applies to everybody, doesn't apply only for the Arabs or for the brown or doesn't matter. Islam doesn't have an idea that's specific to one people. The second portion, which is really the transformation, when you understand that identity and you embody it, that's when transformation happens. And the leaders of the transformations are the leaders of the Islamic movement in the world. And the head of that is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum as the first Islamic political movement that came and changed society forever. That is the transformation we're speaking about. When a person now views life from the Islamic lens, from the Islamic paradigm, where everything basically needs to fit that paradigm, which leads to justice and peace and prosperity. The number one quality of a true scholar is fearlessness. Okay? Fearlessness of anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embodied that in the Quran by saying, الَّذِينَ يُبَلِّغُونَ رِسَالَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَخْشَوْنَهُ وَلَا يَخْشَوْنَ أَحَدًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Those prophets and those who are in their footsteps, which are the inheritors, the scholars, they deliver them the complete message of Islam, and they fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they fear none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you have the courage to speak the truth and to speak about every portion in the Quran, that's only then you become a scholar. A scholar is not just basically, a human with books in his brain installed, right? Today with AI, you could put you a chip, maybe soon, it's getting very quick, basically. By the way, as an IT professional myself, you're going to be able to download the Islamic library in your head, okay? And then what? The question is a scholar versus a non-scholar is the one who can basically have the courage to basically come and try to change society, to preach not on a ritualistic level, but on a social justice level, to remold humanity with the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the justice of the system that Allah have sent to us, which is Islam. So this is what true scholarship should look like, and that's what the Islamic identity is, and that's how transformation really happens when we embody these traits of fearlessness and understanding Islam holistically, desecularizing the Muslim mind.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sahil. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. And thank you, everybody, for attending and watching this episode. What we got next is we're going to talk about the influence of systems, sovereignty of nation versus sovereignty of Allah. What is your role for change? Do you have any responsibility as an average human, as a Muslim on this earth? And what is the vision and blueprint for revival? Jazakumullah khairan. We'll see you on the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.